وسهلا ومرحبا to Let's Learn Arabic Level 1. Thanks for joining me on today's show. Now let's begin by reviewing the letters we covered during the previous session. We talked about the long vowel alif, which makes the sound a, as in the word bad or in the word father, so it could be either frontal or deep. We also talked about the letter ba, and ba is equivalent to the sound of the English letter B, so it just makes the ba sound. We also talked about the letter ta, and ta is like the frontal T sound in the word teeth. It is not like the flap in the word, like the word bottle, more like ta in teeth. And then finally, we talked about the letter tha, which makes one of the sounds of th, as in the English language, we have two th sounds. This is the first one, and it's the tha as in thanks, not the th sound as in that. So it's more like tha in thanks. So today, we're going to cover a few more letters, and yalla bina, we'll get started. Today, we're going to cover the following letters. The first one is the letter waw. And waw makes the oo sound. It's a long vowel. It's the second of the long vowels. It's just like the alif was the first. Then we also have the letter ya, and this is the third and final long vowel. It makes the ya sound. We'll follow that by the three short vowels that exist in the Arabic language. The first one is the fatha, and that makes the short a sound. Then we have the damma, that makes the short oo sound. And then finally the kasra, that makes the short e sound. Let's start off with the letter waw. And again, waw is a long vowel, so it's definitely going to stretch out kind of like you would in an exclamation by saying ooh. So it definitely should sound a little longer than what you would expect from a oo sound, as in the word booth. It should be more like ooh. So this is waw. Let's read some words just so that we can hear how it sounds. The first word here is toot. Toot. We see here the waw in the middle of the word. Toot. Then we have Tunis. Again, waw is in the middle of the word. Tunis. And then finally, tahabbu. And waw is at the end of the word. Tahabbu. Let's take a look at how the waw is written. Now, waw is similar to the alif in that it does not connect with letters that follow it. So when you write a waw in the beginning, the initial position, it will look like this on a line. And in a middle position, it will connect with the letter that precedes it. So here's the connecting letters that come, in that word. They would be right next to the waw, and they would simply connect with it. Okay? And then finally, in its final position, it would also be written similarly, except for that in the middle position, when a letter comes after it, it does not connect to it. And that's your waw. Just stretch it out and keep practicing. Our last long vowel is the letter ya, and ya makes the sound e. And again, because it is a long vowel, so you can expect it to be twice as long as the e in the word beep in English. So it's more like e. Let's see some words here that have the letter ya in them and see how it sounds within them. So the first one is to be. The ya here is at the end. And again, we don't want to cut it short, so we pronounce it precisely, give it the exact amount of time it needs. To be. Then we have tathbeet, and the ya here is in the middle of the word. It's before the last letter. Tathbeet. And then finally, the last word we have is libi. And here we have two yas, a ya in the middle of the word, and then a ya at the end of a word. Libi. So notice that we have to put extra emphasis to make sure that it gets enough time for pronunciation. And you want to do that with every letter in the Arabic alphabet because, like I mentioned before, it is a phonetic language, so you want to make sure that everything is pronounced correctly and given its adequate amount of time. Let's look and see how the ya is written in its beginning, initial part of the word, and middle part of the word, and also at the end of the word. The yeah is going to look a little different. Notice here that I kind of tell my students that it kind of looks like a little duck, and it's got 2 dots at the bottom. So this will take a different form in the beginning of a word. You're never going to see it this way. You're going to see it on top of a line, kind of like how we've seen the ba and the ta and the tha, but with 2 dots on the bottom of it, okay? So again, just very similar to the ba and ta and tha, but with 2 dots. Now again, you can connect these dots as you did with the ba and the ta and the tha, and you'll see that especially in handwritten documents. In the middle part of a word, the ya again is going to connect from the right and the left. It is a connecting letter, and it will look like this. So a letter would be here, and a letter can also follow it in the middle of a word. And then finally, at the end of a word, you're finally going to see the ya looking like it does on its own. So the ya will connect with whatever letter that precedes it, and it will come down underneath the line with 2 dots. And you want to keep your dots there. That's how you can differentiate between it and additional sounds that you'll learn later on as we continue with our Arabic alphabet. And that is your ya. So far we've talked about the long vowels in the Arabic alphabet, and just to remind you, they were alif, the a, and waw, the u, and ya, which is the E. Now remember, in English there are no long vowels, so when you do use the long vowels in Arabic, you have to stretch them out a little longer than you would expect them to sound, because again, they don't exist in the English language. So with practice, you'll be able to identify them as well as make those sounds yourselves. So today, we're going to move on and talk about the short vowels. And to each of these long vowels, they have a corresponding short vowel. So for the alif, we have a fatha. So where we have the alif making the sound of a, the fatha would just be shorter than that, and it would be a. The waw also has a corresponding vowel marking, and this vowel marking is called Damma. And Damma would make the oo sound versus waw making the oo sound. And again, the last one is ya, the long vowel of e, versus a kasra, and kasra would be a shortened e. It would just simply be E. Now these vowel markings are really important in terms of texts that are scripted. We talked about that during our last episode. There are texts that are scripted versus unscripted. The scripted ones would have the vowel markings on them. And again, these would help the readers be able to pronounce the words more accurately if they are labeled. And they would also help with new words. And they can actually make a difference in terms of what a word would mean. So just one different vowel marking can completely change the meaning of a word. So you want to practice these and at least for now be able to just recognize them, know that they exist, and we'll use each of these now and show you what they would sound like with a long vowel versus a short vowel. Fatha is the short vowel that corresponds to the long vowel of the letter alif. So this is the fatha, and again, it is a vowel marking, so it would go on top of a letter to give it a short sound of a, and you could think of that sound as the E in the word bed, the e sound, which is frontal, or it could also be deep, as in the word cut, and that is also another way to pronounce it. Now, the way that it's pronounced, whether it's deep or frontal, is going to depend on the surrounding letters. And if the letters are more frontal, like ba and ta, it would be a frontal sound like as in bed. And if they're deep, it would sound more like the in cut. So this is it. And let's listen to how it would sound on top of a letter. Let's look at some of these words here, this tadrib exercise. And the first word here, we have the fatha on top of the tha. So we're going to pronounce it as tha, and all together is thabat, thabat. So we don't hear a very long sound, it's actually really short, thabat. And here's the second word, which is taba, we see the fatha on top of the ba, so the ba is going to take on that short sound, taba. Now, if I was to change this around and say tha with an alif instead of a fatha, it would sound a little different. It would sound longer, and it would be tha, whereas here it's thabata. Okay, so it's definitely shorter than here. And now let's talk about how the fatha is placed on top of letters. What you want to do is place it on top of the preceding letter that it's going to impact. So it's almost kind of on top of the letter, but in a way it starts right before it. Okay, and that would be your fatha. Let's do another exercise just to see where we should place the fatha on here by sounding it out. So we'll consider this to be an unscripted text. We have the ba and alif and ta, and you should be able to recognize this by now. And I'm going to pronounce it as bata, bata. So we know that ba and alif would make the ba sound, and then the last part of that word is ta. So we don't see here an alif or anything that would signify an rise, a vowel rise. So we do need to put a fatha here, and that would become ta, bata. Okay? And the next word here, we have the letter tha, ba, and ta. And again, you should be able to recognize this by now because we've covered all these letters. And I'm going to pronounce it as thabata. So each one of these letters is actually taking on a short sound. Tha, ba, ta, thabata. If I was to write this with alifs instead, long vowels, let's say, for example, ba, ta with an alif, it would be thabata because it's a long vowel. But instead, we have a short vowel, fatha, and it's just thabata. So that's your fatha. It takes time to recognize it, so I suggest you keep practicing, maybe hearing the words and reviewing them, and you'll be able to get it in no time. Next we have the vowel Damma, which corresponds to the letter waw. So this is your Damma, and it looks almost like a miniature waw. So this is your regular waw that makes the long oo sound, and this is your Damma, and it would make a half of that sound, like a shorter oo sound, as in the word booth if it's frontal, or as in the word wool if it's deep. So again, the Damma would be influenced by the surrounding letters, whether it's going to be deep or frontal, and you want to shorten it half of the length of what you would usually make for the letter waw. Let's take a look at the distinct sounds that the Damma would make versus the waw. So here we have the first word. We have the letter tha, ba, waw, and ta. And again, you should be able to recognize all these letters by now. Here, the tha has a Damma on top, so it's going to be pronounced as thu. So literally just a very short oo, thu. And you want to round your mouth when you're making the sound of Damma. If you just do that, you would be able to get it correctly. All together would be thubut. And notice how the waw is much longer, thubut. Okay. Here we have ta and ba, and the ta has a Damma on top. So simply, if you round your mouth for the Damma, when you're making the sound of ta, as in tub, then you'll be able to get it right. It's tub. Okay, if I had ta waw ba, it would be tube. Okay, so that's much longer sounding of the oo sound. And then lastly, I have ba and tha, and the ba here has a Damma on top of it, so again, keep your mouth rounded. Bu, so buth together, buth. If I had a waw instead of a Damma, after the ba, it would be booth. Okay, so a little different than buth, obviously. Now, one key important thing to remember is that You don't want to confuse the Damma with the vowels of O and U in the English language, because these vowels make different sounds in the English language, whereas the Damma is going to consistently sound like a short vowel of U. Earlier I mentioned that the English language does not have long vowels, and what I mean by that, symbols that represent long vowels. They only have the shortened symbols that like A, E, O, U, and sometimes Y. Whereas in Arabic we have really distinct ones, like you see here. This is a shortened vowel, and then we have the long vowels that I mentioned earlier. The last short vowel that we'll be covering today is the kasra, and kasra is just a slanted line beneath the letter, and it corresponds to the long vowel ya. So it's just a shortened E sound, as in the word bit, the E in it. So now this kasra can also be either deep or frontal as well, and again, it's just like the other vowels that we've had. It is impacted by the surrounding letters, whether it's going to be deep or frontal. Let's take a look at some of these words and see how they are pronounced when the kasra is written beneath them. So yalla bina. Let's look at the first word is tha. You see the tha, and again, you should be able to recognize this with a kasra underneath it, and aba. So the kasra would make the tha sound th, would make that th, and together it would be thib. Okay? Now if I had a ya, so a tha, which is, the corresponding long vowel, ya ba, it would be thebe. Okay, so very, very different here. This is very long. Thebe versus thib. All right? This next word, and it's much longer, but every letter here, again, we have covered, so you should be able to recognize it, if not right away, with time. We have the ta with the Damma, we have the tha, the ba, and there's a kasra, and then a ta, and finally the ya in its final position. So the ta has a Damma on it, so we want to round our mouth, as in tu, and then tha has nothing, so tooth. Ba has a kasra, so tooth bi t e. So tooth biti. Okay? So notice that we have a kasra underneath the ba. So it just makes the bi sound. If I was to change this kasra into the long vowel ya, which would make this word even longer, but let's just do it for the sake of seeing what it would sound like. Lots of dots. Take care of your dots. So take care of them right away when you're writing, immediately for that letter. Okay. So in this case, it would be tooth bt. Tooth bt. So much, much longer than tooth biti. Okay. And finally, let's do the last word, which is a ba and a ta together, and the ba has a kasra underneath it. So bit, as in bit. Bit. If we change that kasra into the long corresponding vowel, which is ya, right, it would be beat. Beat. Okay? And you could really see the difference and hear the difference in that. The kasra would always go beneath the letter where it needs to make that impact of a short vowel. And that's pretty much all you really need to know about the kasra.